Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Retro Media Room. Today, I want to take a look at 5 more PlayStation 2 games that to this day are still exclusive to PlayStation 2, or for that matter, rather stuck on PlayStation 2. So, before we get started, please hit that subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. Hit the notification bell, share it with your friends, like the video to help me with the algorithm, because I'm still trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. Getting there, but it's been rather slow, so hopefully I get there soon so I can actually become monetized and give you better content. And to start the list, we're going to take a look at TimeSplitters. Developed by Free Radical and released by Eidos Interactive, this was a PlayStation 2 launch title, and it was obviously for that reason it was the first PlayStation 2 game I ever owned or played, and it was also the first first-person shooter that I ever played dual analog sticks on, so that took some getting used to when I first fired it up. I didn't know what I was doing, but then you get the hang of it. So the marketing behind this game, it literally says on the back, the fastest first-person shooter ever created for a gaming console. That's pretty much true for the time because it was virtually unheard of for a first-person shooter on consoles to have 60 frames per second. So what's interesting about the developer Free Radical, it was actually founded by former devs of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark from Rare, which was Nintendo at the time. So you're actually going to notice quite a bit of DNA from GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and TimeSplitters. When it comes to the graphics of TimeSplitters, for a launch title targeting 60 FPS, this is a pretty decent looking game for the time. While obviously not as impressive as the sequels that would come later, it still holds up fairly well. What does lend to the game's visuals is the variety. So there's a lot of different timelines here across many different types of maps, from ancient Egypt to 1970s China to an old village with zombies, or a futuristic setting on a foreign planet with space weapons and lasers. So there's a lot of variety in that regard, as well as the character variety. A lot of different quirky characters, and they're very well animated, and they're very interesting. There's always 2 to choose from per mission. But where the character variety really shines is in the local multiplayer mode. So like Perfect Dark, you can have up to 4 players, split screen, with bots, and any combination you want of weapons, maps, characters, teams. I mean, there's really kind of endless combinations you can do. It's a lot of fun. My sister and I used to play this to death when we were younger. So it's really a blast to play to this day, old school couch co-op. So overall, this is a fast and fun game that I'm actually surprised hasn't been brought back in any sort of way that I'm aware of, especially since you've got 2 and 3 available through backwards compatibility on Xbox now, and those are very good games. But it all started with this one, and it's still stuck on PlayStation 2 to this day. As you can see on the back here, like I said before, the fastest first-person shooter ever created for a gaming console. I mean, I've always really had. Oh, and also there's a map builder in the multiplayer here. So if you're really into map building, this was kind of one of the originators of that outside of PC. You can literally build maps in all sorts of crazy ways and save them on memory card. It takes a lot of storage on memory cards, but that's not big deal. So if you like that sort of thing, where you be creative with old school engines, I mean this is one way you can do it. And of course, I also love. I'm going to point this out. This metallic blue back on PlayStation 2 discs before they were just pure DVD format. This was their proprietary format. That's my favorite color in the world. I love that color. Just wanted to point that out. But yeah, TimeSplitters on PlayStation 2, absolute classic. First PlayStation 2 game I ever got to play. So yeah, nostalgic. Next up, we have Chaos Legion from Capcom. Not only do I love the title, but I've always felt this is a hidden gem on the PlayStation 2. So as much as I would love to see a modern re-release or remaster of it, probably won't happen because it's really not talked about all that much. Since this came out after the popular game Devil May Cry, also from Capcom, it was often compared to it, even as far as being called a clone of Devil May Cry. But when you really boil it down to its actual core gameplay, it's quite a bit different. In some ways, it actually shares some similarities to the likes of Dynasty Warriors because there's a lot of enemies that can be on screen at once here. So you really feel like you're taking on legions of enemies, more so than just mere groups. But the actual bread and butter of the game that separates itself the most from Devil May Cry is the ability to summon your own personal guard, or legion. So due to the fact that you can summon these in, and it's a huge portion of the mechanics, there's a lot of strategy involved here. So when your summons aren't there, you're at your peak physical power of offense and defense. So there's a strategy in not having them in and building up meter, which you have to have meter to have them in and to do their special moves. But your move set is quite limited, which actually lends to it being quite a bit repetitive. But once you get past its repetitiveness in terms of the fact you have basically one combo and a few little special moves you're able to do, the legions themselves are actually very fun to manage. As they evolve and become more powerful and their quantities change, they change actually quite a bit from where they start to where they end up as you level them up with experience. The legions are really cool. You can equip 2 at a time. Some legions are stronger against certain enemies and weaker against others, so you want to plan accordingly when you approach a map. And that's another thing that's different from Devil May Cry. This isn't simply a linear game of telling a story and going all the way through. It actually encourages you to go back and grind on past maps, master the maps, get better scores and rankings so that you can get more experience and to level up your character. So really there's a ton, in fact, of grinding involved in this game. And it's actually quite a bit addicting because you really want to master your legions. You want to level them up and become an absolute. And when you do, you become an absolute powerhouse. And it's a lot of fun. The graphics are actually quite nice. When there's a ton of enemies on screen, it actually maintains a pretty solid 60 FPS. So while the level design is very basic and some of the textures and art design of some of the maps are kind of boring, almost kind of like Devil May Cry 2, which was extremely boring level design, it makes up for it in substance of the mechanics with the legions and the combat and the quantity of enemies. And it gets to a point where you find certain ways to get as much experience as possible and you exploit those any way you can to level up your legions so that you can get better at the game, master the game. And so it really is kind of addicting and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, Chaos Legion, I've always liked the game. It always seemed like people either wrote it off as a repetitive DMC clone or overlooked it, don't even know about it. But I've always, it really is a hidden gem and I've always liked it. So yeah, Chaos Legion. I would love to see a re-release of it, but like I said, there's nobody talks about it, so we'll probably never see it. Next, we have another first-person shooter called Cold Winter, developed by Swordfish Studios and released by Sierra. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to bury the lead here. This game is kind of rough, but it's a diamond in the rough. I would even call it a hidden gem. With a not-so-great frame rate, sluggish controls that you really can't do a whole lot in the options to help it very much. So if you're playing Call of Duty and you switch to this, it's going to be a rough adjustment. Some of the maps or levels are a little bit too dark. Some of the objectives that you have to do in the missions, kind of via GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, are a little bit annoying to figure out where to go and what to do. It sounds like I'm really being hard on this game, but I still really like it, though. It's got soul to it. It's got spirit to it. It's just unlike a lot of things at the time. It's some of the best looking gore I've seen this side of Soldier of Fortune. It does have ambitious graphics and physics and detail. It's a really interesting, cool game. The hyper detailed weapons, cool animations, pretty interesting characters with personality. It's almost like a extra gory, gritty James Bond or Mission Impossible or something in between. It's a pretty cool game. I've always appreciated it. And the fact that it's a PS2 exclusive, this is the only version of it that I'm aware of that exists. So it's a very interesting title that's worth checking out, especially if you just want to see something that if you've loved PlayStation 2 and you just want to have something that's like, hey, the only way you can play this is on PlayStation 2. This is a pretty interesting title. Next, we have Drakengard from Square Enix. So there's Square Enix written all over this game, of course. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When you first boot this up, you land in the battlefield, your first impression is going to be, this just looks like a generic Dynasty Warriors with the Square Enix coat of paint. You only have a 3-hit combo with a basic sword, 1 magic attack, 1 magic variant attack within your combo, and that's it. Super bare bones, super repetitive, takes forever to kill the enemies, which you have to target specific enemies to move on to the next part of the mission. But trust me, stick with it. It is absolutely worth it. You gain much longer combos as you upgrade your weapons. You find other weapons that have their own magic attacks, your health and magic upgrades. And not only all of that, but you get a dragon. Literally like Dragonheart, your life becomes connected to that dragon. You have flying missions where you do Panzer Dragoon style shooting and fighting with the dragon. Then you fly over the battlefield with the dragon. You take on enemies with your dragon. And then you get either jump off or get knocked off your dragon. You fight them on the ground. And it just gets better and better and better. There's actually a lot of depth here. So like I said, while it starts off a little slow, you stick with it. I want to play this right now. Like out of all these games I've been checking out, this one surprised me in how, wow, I want to keep going. So this is a very interesting game. It is a hidden gem in my opinion. You don't hear about it very often. I can't speak for the sequels yet because I've never played them. But this is a really cool and interesting game. Of course, I love the artwork here in the front. So if you like, actually, that is kind of an accurate description. It's kind of a Square Enix attempt at Dynasty Warriors, but with dragons and more RPG level depths, which actually as a whole game, it's actually better than Dynasty Warriors because I like Dynasty Warriors, but this has more RPG elements to it and story. So yeah, Drakengard, very, very cool game. And our fifth and final game is going to be Shadow Hearts from, surprisingly, Midway. RPGs are not exactly the typical type of games that come from Midway, but it did in this case, and it's really good. Fantastic music with a beautiful high resolution opening cinema that really pulls you into the story and intrigues you. A really cool, charismatic main character, very well written and interesting dialogue with characters that have a lot of character. When it comes to the game's visuals, the pre-rendered backgrounds are really nice with good detail and atmosphere. The character models look nice. They're pretty well animated. The only part that shows its age a little bit is when you go into the turn-based battles. The environments look okay. Some of the animations in that case are a little bit stilted from the monsters and such, but otherwise quite good. But the part that I actually forgot about that really impressed me about Shadow Hearts is how well done the interface of the menus are. The look of them, how polished they are, how comprehensive they are. I don't know what it is. It just looks really smooth. The way it feels like a page ripping when you go into the menu, everything's organized well, everything looks sharp. I don't know, just the design and art of it is really, really nice, and I feel like it's kind of lost nowadays. When it comes to the game's combat, a lot of it's what you would expect from an RPG with turn-based combat, but the thing that sets it apart from a lot of others is the Judgment Ring mechanic. The Judgment Ring applies to your standard attacks, magic attacks, using items. Pretty much every action you take, the ring pops up on screen, and you do multiple button presses, and you have to time it correctly. And if you mistime it, you either miss your attack entirely. If you land them all, you get the standard version of the attack. Or if you even land right at the edge of things, you can get bonus damage. So there's a little bit of risk, a little bit of reward. It's interactive, so it actually keeps the combat pretty fresh. But what I really like in the combat is the fact that you're able to collect various monsters up to 20 throughout the game that Yuri, the main character, is able to transform into, which is really, really cool. You transform into that monster, and you're able to remain as that monster throughout the fight until you either transform back or turn into another monster and so on. They have their own magic attacks and combos and animations and look to them. There's some of the design is really cool. The game has fun combat with some twists to it, enough to keep it feeling fresh. So overall, this game is a really cool game. I've always really liked it. This is actually one of the few on here that I've fully beaten, played all the way through many years ago, and I would actually like to play it again because it's a really interesting game, and it has a couple sequels, which I also have, and I never have played those very much. So I do want to play those and get around to beating them. So then that was Shadow Hearts. And that was 5 PlayStation 2 games that are pretty much still stuck on PlayStation 2 that felt wanted to give a little bit of love to, kind of showcase a little bit in case some of you all, it's either nostalgic, you've never seen it before, want to track them down. Although Shadow Hearts is one of the few on here that is actually quite expensive to get a hold of. So, that's going to be a bit of a challenge, but really, a lot of these aren't too bad, though. So if you like the video, please subscribe and hit the like button to help me with the algorithm. Share it with your friends. I really appreciate you watching up to this point. I just want to spread the love of retro gaming. Probably when I hit 1,000 subscribers, I was thinking about doing something like looking at all of my consoles and ranking them based on their value because, well, that's one of the only things I have left to talk about, the value of some of my collection, because it's been interesting to research some of that. So if anything else, have a blessed day.